The council chamber was the largest room Admiral de Suhayak had ever seen. It floated at the center of Station Apex, a massive space station where 12 alien species gathered to decide the fate of the galaxy. The walls were made of some crystal that showed the stars outside. The ceiling rose so high that clouds actually formed near the top. Everything about this place was designed to make visitors feel small. It was working. Day sat at a curved table with his team. Captain Hannah Yoon was on his right, her fingers tapping quietly against her leg. Lieutenant Taewon sat on his left, recording everything with a small device hidden in his collar. They were the only humans in a room filled with creatures that looked nothing like them. The Voroth delegation sat directly across from them. They were tall beings with gray skin and 4 arms. Their leader, Ambassador Grell, had not stopped smiling since the meeting began. It was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of someone who already knew they had one. "Let us be clear about what we are asking," Grell said. His voice was smooth and cold. "The 3 systems you call New Sol, Busan Prime, and Incheon Station are located in a region that affects galactic trade routes. For the stability of all species, these systems must be placed under council control." Day kept his face calm. "Those systems have been human territory for 60 years. Over 4 million of our people live there. It will be relocated," Grell said, waving one of his 4 hands as if this was a small matter. "The council will provide transport. You want us to abandon our homes? We want you to understand your place." Grell leaned forward. "Humanity has been part of this community for 80 years. That is nothing. The Vorath hegemony has existed for 11,000 years. The Kalori Federation, 9,000. You are children who have just learned to walk among the stars. Children do not make demands. Children listen." Hannah's tapping stopped. Day felt her anger rising beside him, but she stayed silent. He had trained her well. "We are not making demands," Day said slowly. "We are asking to keep what is ours." The representative from the Kalor Federation spoke next. She was a being made of what looked like living light, her form shifting and flowing. "Admiral, please understand. This is not punishment. This is guidance. Younger species often expand too quickly. They take territory they cannot defend. We are helping you avoid a mistake by taking our territory for us. By teaching you patience." The Morthok delegate laughed. He was a massive creature covered in black scales, with teeth like broken glass. "Patience. Yes, humans are famous for their patience." The sarcasm dripped from every word. Several other delegates joined his laughter. Day said nothing. He waited. Ambassador Grell stood. He walked around the table slowly, his 4 arms clasped behind his back. "I have studied your species," he said. "Fascinating creatures. You know what I find most interesting? Your history." He stopped beside the human delegation, looking down at them. "You fight, constantly. You fight over land, over ideas, over things you call religion and politics. You killed millions of your own kind. Millions." He paused to let that word sink in. "And now you sit here, pretending to be civilized, pretending to be our equals." Hannah's hands had become fists. Taewon had stopped breathing. "We have moved beyond our past," Day said quietly. "Have you?" Grell smiled wider. "Your ships still carry weapons designed to burn entire planets. Your soldiers still train for something you call total war. You are a species that solves problems with violence. That is your nature. That is all you will ever be." The chamber was silent. Every alien in the room was watching, waiting to see how the humans would react. Day looked at Grell for a long moment. Then he looked around the room at the other delegates. Some looked amused. Some looked bored. None looked like they disagreed with what Grell had said. "I see," Day said finally. "You have made your position clear. Then you accept our terms." "No." Day stood slowly. "I am requesting a recess. Humanity needs time to consider its response." Grell's smile faded slightly. "A recess? For how long?" 48 hours. That seems unnecessary. "The terms are simple. Accept them, and we can all move forward. 48 hours. Day repeated. He began gathering his documents. Hannah and Taewon stood with him. The Kalori representative flickered with concern. Admiral, I hope you are not considering anything unwise. The Council has many resources. Humanity has... fewer. I am aware of our resources. Then you understand that resistance would be foolish. Day stopped. He turned to face the room one final time. His face showed nothing. No anger, no fear, no emotion at all. But Hannah, who had served with him for 15 years, saw something in his eyes that made her blood run cold. She had seen that look once before, during a battle where their ship was surrounded and everyone thought they would die. It was the look of a man who had stopped caring about survival. Ambassador Grell Day said. His voice was soft, almost gentle. You called us violent. You said we solve problems with destruction. You laughed at our history of war. I stated facts, Grell replied, but his smile was gone now. Yes, you did. Day picked up the last of his documents. You looked at our past and saw monsters. You saw a species that burned its own world, that killed without mercy, that created weapons capable of ending all life. And somehow, knowing all of this, you decided to threaten us, to mock us, to back us into a corner. He walked toward the door. Hannah and Taewon followed. That was a mistake, Day said without turning around. You should have kept us happy. You should have given us no reason to remember what we are. Is that a threat? Grell's voice had lost its smoothness. Day stopped at the door. He turned his head just enough to look back at the ambassador. You said we solve problems with violence. You said that is all we will ever be. His eyes were empty of everything except cold, absolute certainty. Then let us show you what violence looks like. He walked out. The door closed behind him. For a long moment, no one in the chamber spoke. Then quietly, the Kalori representative flickered and said what everyone was thinking. What have we done? The transport ship carrying the human delegation reached Earth orbit in 36 hours. By the time Admiral Day stepped off the vessel, the news had already spread across every human colony. People were angry. More than angry. They were furious. Day watched the news feeds as he was driven to the United Defense Command building. Protests filled the streets of every major city. People carried signs with words like "Never surrender" and "Remember who we are." Some burned flags bearing the symbol of the Galactic Council. On one colony world, citizens had torn down a statue built to celebrate humanity's entry into the galactic community, 80 years of trying to be good neighbors, 80 years of following rules and accepting insults and pretending they were equals. All of it had meant nothing. The Defense Command building was an old structure, built before humanity had even reached Mars. It had survived 3 world wars, to near-extinction events, and the chaos of first contact. Its walls were thick and gray, built to last forever. President Uribeek was waiting in the main conference room when Day arrived. She was a small woman with silver hair and tired eyes. She had spent her entire career working for peace. She had negotiated trade deals, prevented border conflicts, and built alliances with 3 alien species. Everyone said she was the best diplomat humanity had ever produced. Now she sat at the head of a table, surrounded by generals and admirals, and she looked like she had not slept in days. Admiral Day, she said, sit down. Tell us everything. Day told them. He described the chamber, the delegates, the demands. He told them what Ambassador Grell had said, word for word. When he finished, the room was silent. General Sung Hae-won broke the silence. He was the supreme commander of all human military forces, a thin man with gray hair and calm eyes. He had never raised his voice in his life. He never needed to. They want 3 systems, he said. If we give them 3, they will want 5, then 10, then all of it. Agreed, Day said. President Beak closed her eyes. I spent 40 years building bridges with these species. I thought if we were patient, if we proved ourselves, they would eventually accept us. They will never accept us, General Sung said. They are afraid of us. This was never about territory. It was about control. The door opened and Dr. Yoon Gi-woo walked in. She was the chief strategist, a woman who had spent her entire career studying alien psychology. She carried a tablet filled with data, but she did not look at it. She had already memorized everything. General Sung is correct, she said, taking a seat. I have analyzed every interaction between humans and the Council over the past 80 years. Every treaty, every negotiation, every small insult we were told to ignore. The pattern is clear. They are not trying to integrate us. They are trying to contain us. President Beak looked at her. Explain. Every species in the Council has one thing in common. They fight wars, but they fight them in a limited way. They battle over a system here, a trade route there. They posture and threaten and eventually negotiate. Casualties are measured in thousands. Wars last a few years at most. Then everyone goes back to normal. Yoon paused. Humans do not fight like that. We fight to win, General Sung said. You fight to destroy. Yoon's voice held no judgment, only truth. Your species has a concept that no other species has developed. You call it total war. When humans fight, they do not stop until the enemy cannot fight anymore. You burn cities. You destroy industry. You kill civilians. You sacrifice millions of your own soldiers for victory. She looked around the room. The Council has studied our history. They know about your world wars. They know about the atomic bombs. They know what humans are capable of when they decide winning matters more than survival. President Beak's face was pale. They fear us. They are terrified of us. And terrified people do dangerous things. They will keep pushing us, keep taking from us, until we are too weak to be a threat, or until we fight back. The room fell silent again. Everyone understood what she was saying. There were only two paths forward now: surrender slowly over decades, or fight back now. Admiral Day spoke. Madame President, Elide asked you a question, and I need you to answer honestly. Ask, if we go to war, can we win? The question hung in the air. General Sung pulled up a holographic display. Numbers filled the space above the table. Ship counts, soldier counts, resource comparisons. The Vorith hegemony alone has 200 times our number of warships, he said. Combined with their allies, they outnumber us 500 to 1 in military personnel. Their territory spans 3,000 star systems. Ours spans 47. That sounds like a no, President Beak said. It sounds like impossible odds. General Sung smiled slightly. It was a strange smile, the smile of a man who knew something others did not. But I have studied their wars. They fight for territory. They retreat when losses become too high. They protect their assets and calculate acceptable casualties. He turned off the display. We do not fight like that. When our ancestors faced impossible odds, they did not calculate. They charged. They sacrificed. They made the enemy pay for every inch of ground and blood. What are you saying? The President asked. I am saying that numbers do not tell the whole story. They have more ships. We have something they do not understand. We have the will to fight until nothing is left. They have never faced an enemy like that. No species in this galaxy has. Dr. Yu nodded. Their military doctrine has no answer for an enemy that refuses to surrender. They will not know what to do. President Beak sat very still for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was heavy with grief. How many will die? No one answered. They all knew the number would be enormous. She stood and walked to the window. Outside, the sun was setting over the city. Millions of people lived their lives below, unaware that their future was being decided in this room. I never wanted this, she said quietly. I spent my whole life trying to prevent this. I know, Day said. She turned around. Her eyes were wet, but her voice was steady. Prepare the declaration. Send it on all galactic frequencies. Make it simple. Make it clear. General Sung nodded. What should it say? The President walked back to the table. She placed her hands flat on its surface and looked at each person in the room. Tell them we reject their terms. Tell them humanity declares war on the Vorith hegemony and all signatories to the Apex demands. Tell them there will be no further negotiation. She paused. And tell them we are coming. 6 hours later, the message was sent. It traveled at faster than light speed across the galaxy, reaching every species, every world, every station. It was only 3 sentences long. It contained no threats, no demands, no conditions, just a simple statement of fact. On every alien world, the message was received. Leaders stopped what they were doing. Military commanders read it twice, then 3 times, unable to believe what they were seeing. Then the panic began. Ships were recalled. Defense systems were activated. Emergency meetings were called. Ambassador Grell locked himself in his quarters and refused to speak to anyone, because they all understood something that humans did not yet know. This was not just a war between humanity and the Vorith. This was the moment the galaxy had feared since first contact. The monsters had woken up, and they were angry. Ambassador Grell had not eaten in 3 days. He sat in his private quarters on the Vorith homeworld, staring at the wall. His 4 hands trembled. Sleep would not come. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Admiral Day's face. That empty, terrible calm. Those eyes that held no anger, only certainty. He had made a mistake. He had pushed too hard. He had laughed at the wrong species. A knock came at his door. He ignored it. The knock came again, louder. "Ambassador, the High Commander requires your presence." Grell closed his eyes and took a breath. Then he stood and walked out to meet his fate. The Vorath military headquarters was buried deep beneath the capital city. It had stood for 8,000 years and had never fallen to any enemy. High Commander Veth waited in the main war room, surrounded by screens showing ship positions across the galaxy. He was old, even by Vorith standards. He had fought in 11 wars and won them all. His gray skin was marked with scars from battles most people had forgotten. Ambassador Veth said without turning around, "You told the Council that humans were primitive, that they would accept our terms. I believed they would." Grell's voice was weak. "Every other species has." The pattern was clear. Push them, threaten them, give them no choice. They always fold. Humans are not every other species. Veth finally turned to face him. "I have called in our best scholars to explain exactly how badly you have failed us. Scholar Myron New, please begin." A small alien stepped forward. Myron New was from a neutral species called the Urani, beings known for their knowledge and their refusal to take sides in any conflict. She was young by her people's standards, barely 200 years old. She had spent the last 50 years studying one subject only: humans. "High Commander," she began. Her voice was calm, but her hands shook slightly as she activated a holographic display. "What I am about to show you is not pleasant. I apologize in advance." The first image appeared. It showed a field covered in bodies, thousands of them, humans, lying in mud, surrounded by broken machines. "This is from their first Great War," Myranu said. "They called it World War I. It lasted for years. 10 million soldiers died. 20 million more were wounded. They fought over a few miles of ground, sending wave after wave of young men into weapons they knew would kill them." Veth studied the image. They lost 10 million soldiers for a few miles. Yes. And they did not stop. They did not surrender. They kept fighting until one side could not continue. The image changed. A city in ruins. Fire everywhere. Bodies in the streets. 20 years later, they fought again, World War II. This time, 70 million died. They invented new weapons just to kill each other faster. They bombed entire cities into ash. They built camps designed for nothing but killing. Myranu paused. When one side was losing, they created a new weapon, called it the atomic bomb. It could destroy a city in a single flash. They used it, twice on their own planet, against populated cities. To end the war faster, silence filled the room. The Vorith officers looked at each other with growing unease. The images kept coming. War after war. Bodies piled in mass graves, cities burning. Soldiers charging into certain death while singing. Families torn apart, children orphaned. Through it all, the humans kept fighting. "This is what they did to each other," Myranu said softly. "To their own species, their own families. Their own neighbors?" She turned off the display. "They have a concept called total war. It means that when they fight, they do not stop. until the enemy is completely destroyed. Not defeated, destroyed. Unable to ever fight again, Ambassador Grell felt sick. We knew their history. We thought they had moved beyond it. They have not moved beyond it, Myranu said. They have contained it. For 80 years, they have smiled and negotiated and pretended to be peaceful. But that nature is still there. You saw it in Admiral Day's eyes. You woke it up. High Commander Veth walked slowly around the room. How do they fight? What tactics do they use? Everything. Myranu pulled up new data. They use direct attacks when they have advantage. When they do not, they use something called guerrilla warfare. Small groups attacking and disappearing. They destroy their own resources rather than let enemies take them. They call this scorched earth. They send soldiers on missions with no chance of survival, and the soldiers go willingly. They strap explosives to themselves and walk into enemy positions. Suicide attacks. They consider it honorable to die for their people. They have thousands of years of stories celebrating those who sacrifice themselves. Myranu's voice dropped. They do not fear death the way we do. They fear losing more than they fear dying. Veth stopped walking. What do you recommend? Surrender immediately. Give them everything they want and hope they accept. The room exploded with protests. Officers shouted that surrender was impossible, that the Voroth had never lost a war, that they could not show weakness. Myranu waited for silence. Then she spoke again, very quietly. You have 11,000 years of history. They have 10,000. In that time, you have fought 43 wars. Do you know how many wars humans have fought? Just among themselves? No one answered. Over 15,000 recorded conflicts. They average more than one war per year of their existence. They are not a species that learned to fight. They are a species built for it. High Commander Veth raised his hand for silence. Every officer stopped talking. Scala, if we fight them and win, what happens? You will not win. But even if you did, even if you destroyed their fleet and burned their worlds, survivors would remain. They would rebuild. They would remember. And they would come back. Maybe in 10 years, maybe in 100. But they would come back, and they would not stop until your species no longer existed.
Veth considered this.
And if we surrender, then perhaps they will show mercy. Their history shows they are capable of forgiveness after victory. They rebuilt their enemies after World War II. They made allies of those who tried to destroy them. Ambassador Grell stepped forward. Then we must contact the Council. Tell them to withdraw the demands. End this before it begins. Veth shook his head slowly. I already tried. The Council refused. They said admitting fear would make them look weak. They believe we can win quickly if we strike first and hard. They are wrong, Myranu said. I know. Veth walked to a window and looked out at the stars. Prepare our defenses. The humans will be here soon. As if answering his words, an alarm began to sound. Officers rushed to their screens. High Commander. Human fleet detected entering our territory. Veth turned. How many ships? 12, sir. Only 12? 12? One of the officers laughed nervously. We have thousands of ships in that sector alone. What do they think 12 can do? Myranu looked at the tactical display. The 12 human ships were small, fast, and heading directly toward the largest Vorath defense station in the region. They were not slowing down. They were accelerating. They're not trying to fight the station, she said slowly. They are going to ram it. That is insane. They will all die. Myranu watched the ships grow closer to the station. The Vorath defenders were firing everything they had. 2 human ships exploded, then 3 more. But the others kept coming. She said quietly. They will all die, and they will take 5,000 of your soldiers with them. And tomorrow, more humans will come. And the day after that, even more. The remaining human ships hit the station. The explosion was visible from 3 systems away. When it faded, the station was gone. Completely destroyed. The room was silent. Myranu gathered her materials and walked toward the door. Before she left, she turned back one final time. You asked what humans do in war? Now you know. They die. Willingly. Gladly. as long as they take you with them. She paused. Welcome to Total War. Months into the war, the human flagship Unconquered Sun drifted through the wreckage of what had once been a Vorath military base. Admiral Day stood at the observation window, watching pieces of broken ships float past. Some still had lights flickering inside. Some still had bodies behind him. Commander Hannah Yoon studied the damage reports. We lost 4 ships in the assault. 1,800 dead? And them? 12 ships destroyed. Defense base eliminated. Estimated enemy casualties around 9,000. Day nodded slowly. These were good numbers. Better than expected. But good numbers meant nothing when you were counting bodies. Every one of those 1,800 dead soldiers had a family somewhere. Parents who would never see their children again. Children who would grow up without mothers or fathers. The war was going well by military standards. 3 Vorath systems had fallen. Human tactics had shocked the galaxy. They used strategies no other species had ever seen. Ships loaded with explosives piloted directly into enemy formations. Soldiers who hid for weeks in destroyed bases, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Entire colonies that destroyed themselves rather than surrender. Taking thousands of enemy troops with them, the Vorath did not know how to respond. Their military had trained for 10,000 years to fight wars a certain way. Attack, defend, negotiate, repeat. They had never faced an enemy that simply refused to stop. An enemy that smiled while dying as long as they killed something on the way out. But victory came at a cost. Human colonies were burning too. 32 had fallen in the first 3 months. Millions of civilians were dead. Refugee ships filled the space between worlds, carrying families who had lost everything. Day had not slept properly in weeks. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the faces of the dead. Admiral. A young officer approached. Private Q's unit is reporting from the surface. They captured something. What kind of something? A communications array. Vorath military grade. It contains transmissions from across the galaxy. What? Day turned from the window. Bring them to the briefing room. 20 minutes later, Private Q Jamin stood at attention before the Admiral. He was young, barely 22 years old. With the kind of face that should have been smiling in a university classroom, instead of covered in dirt and blood on a warship. He had lost 3 members of his squad taking the array. At ease, Private. Day gestured for him to sit. Tell me what you found. Q pulled up the captured transmissions on the main display. Sir, when we broke into the array's files, we expected to find Vorath military communications. Battle plans, supply routes, that sort of thing. And we found those. But we also found something else. Messages from other species. Not Vorath allies. Neutral powers. Even some species we considered friendly. Hannah leaned forward. What kind of messages? Q pressed a button. A recording began to play. The voice was translated from an alien language, flat and mechanical, to the Vorath High Command. The Kalori Federation urges you to end this conflict immediately. Not for your sake, but for the sake of the galaxy. The humans must be stopped. If they learn to wage war at galactic scale, the way they wage it among themselves, no species will survive. Surrender if you must. Give them whatever they want. Just stop them before they destroy everything. The message ended. Another began. This is the Morthok sovereignty. We have observed human tactics with growing alarm. Their willingness to sacrifice themselves, to destroy their own resources, to fight without consideration for losses. This is not war as we understand it. This is extinctional level conflict. We recommend immediate surrender and negotiation before this spreads beyond Vorath space. More messages played. Dozens of them. Species after species, all saying the same thing. All begging the Vorath to surrender, not to save the Vorath, to stop humanity. Hannah sat back in her chair. Her face was pale. They are afraid of us. They are terrified of us, Q corrected quietly. Admiral Day stood very still. His mind was racing through the implications. 80 years of diplomacy. 80 years of being dismissed and mocked and treated like children. He had assumed it was contempt. He had assumed the aliens looked down on humanity as primitive and weak. He had been wrong. "Play the calorie message again," he said. The recording repeated. He listened more carefully this time. The words were diplomatic, careful. But underneath them, he could hear something else. Something that sounded almost like desperation. The humans must be stopped, not defeated. Stopped, as if humanity was a force of nature. A disaster to be contained, rather than an enemy to be fought. Day walked slowly to the display. He stared at the map of the galaxy, at the dozens of species, watching this war unfold. They had all known. From the very beginning, they had all known what humanity was capable of. "They were not laughing at us," he said quietly. Hannah looked up. "Sir, at the council?" When Grell mocked our history. When he called us violent and primitive, he was not laughing. Day turned to face her. He was praying. He was praying that we would not notice they were afraid. The room was silent. The insults, the demands, the attempts to take our territory, none of it was about control. It was about survival. They were trying to keep us contained, keep us small, keep us focused on ourselves instead of looking outward. He laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. They caged us with treaties and mockery because they knew what would happen if we ever decided to fight. Q shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, does this change anything?" Day considered the question. Did it? Humanity had gone to war because they were insulted and threatened. They had assumed the galaxy saw them as weak. Instead, the galaxy saw them as monsters. What did that mean? He looked at the transmission list again. Dozens of species, thousands of years of civilization. All of them watching. All of them waiting to see what humanity would do next. Private Day said slowly. "When we went to war, what did you think we were fighting for?" Q thought for a moment. "Respect, sir. Dignity. The right to keep what was ours." "And now?" The young man hesitated. "I do not know any more, sir." Day nodded. He felt the same way. Hannah stood and walked to his side. "What do we do now?" "Keep fighting." "We have already won." Day's voice was tired. "Look at these messages. The Vorath cannot beat us. Their allies are begging them to surrender. Even if we stopped right now, the galaxy would never forget what we showed them. So we stop." Day looked out the window again. More wreckage floating past. More lights flickering in dead ships. More bodies drifting in the cold void of space.
No, he said.
"We do not stop, but we change what we are fighting for." He turned to the communications officer. "Open a channel to the Galactic Council. Tell them Admiral Day requests a meeting at Station Apex. No conditions, no demands. Just a conversation." "Sir?" The officer looked confused. "They may see this as weakness. They may..." Straightened his uniform and walked toward the door. "Or they may see it as mercy. I am curious which one frightens them more." Station Apex looked different now. 6 months ago, Admiral Day had walked through its corridors as a visitor, tolerated but not respected. Now, as he approached the council chamber, the corridors were empty. Guards who once stood proudly at every door had been pulled back. The aliens who lived on the station had hidden themselves away, watching through security cameras, afraid to be in the same hallway as a human commander. Commander Hannah Yoon walked at his side. She wore her dress uniform, crisp and clean. The medals on her chest told a story of battles won and lives lost. Behind them, a holographic projector floated silently, ready to display President Yuri Beek's image when the time came. "The council is waiting," Hannah said. "All 12 species. Ambassador Grell is there too." Good Day adjusted his collar. He should see how this ends. They reached the doors of the chamber. The same doors Day had walked out of 6 months ago, leaving behind a promise of violence. He paused for a moment, remembering his own words. "Then let us show you what violence looks like." He had shown them. The galaxy had watched as humanity waged war in ways they had never imagined. For Voroth worlds lay in ruins, their infrastructure destroyed, their military bases burned to nothing. 32 human colonies had been lost in return. Millions were dead on both sides. Refugee camps stretched across neutral space, filled with families who had lost everything. It had been the most destructive war in galactic history, and humanity had been ready to keep fighting for years more. The doors opened. Day walked in. The council chamber was exactly as he remembered. The crystal walls still showed the stars. The ceiling still rose impossibly high. 12 alien species still sat at their curved tables, ranged in a circle around the central floor. But everything felt different. The air itself seemed heavier. No one spoke as the humans entered. No one moved. Admiral Day walked to the center of the room. He stood exactly where Ambassador Grell had stood 6 months ago, when the alien had mocked humanity's violent history. He looked around at the faces watching him. Some were terrified. Some were angry. All were waiting. Ambassador Grell sat at the Vorath table. He looked older. His gray skin had faded to something almost white. He did not meet Day's eyes. "Thank you for agreeing to this meeting," Day said. His voice was calm, measured. "I know many of you expected different terms." The Calorie representative flickered nervously. "We expected demands, punishment, revenge. I know." Day paused. "You expected us to act like the monsters you believed us to be." No one denied it. 6 months ago, I stood in this chamber and listened to Ambassador Grell explain what humanity was. Violent, primitive, a species that solves problems with destruction. Day looked directly at Grell. I was angry. I thought he was insulting us. I thought you all were laughing at us, mocking us, treating us as inferiors. He began to walk slowly around the room. "We captured your communications. We read the messages you sent each other during the war. The begging, the pleading, the desperate prayers that we would stop before we destroyed everything." He stopped walking. "You were never laughing at us. You were afraid of us. From the very beginning," the Morthok representative spoke, his voice rough. "Can you blame us? Look at what you did. Look at what you are willing to do." "No, I do not blame you." Day's voice was soft. "Fear is a reasonable response to what you saw in our history. We are capable of terrible things. We have done terrible things. To each other, and now to you." He turned to the holographic projector. "President Beak, please join us." The projector activated, and President Yuri Beak appeared as a life-sized image in the center of the room. She looked tired, carrying the weight of every decision she had made over the past 6 months. But her eyes were clear. "Representatives of the Galactic Council," she said. "Humanity did not come here to make demands. We came to make an offer." Shocked silence filled the chamber. This was not what they had expected. "You feared us," she continued. "You tried to contain us with treaties and insults, hoping we would stay small and focused on ourselves. It did not work. We learned what we are in your eyes. We learned that you see us as nightmares, as monsters, as the species that perfected destruction." She paused. "You were right to fear us, but you were wrong to make us your enemy." Admiral Day pulled a small data chip from his pocket and placed it on the central table. "This is our offer," he said. "Not a demand, an offer. Full partnership in the Galactic Council. Equal seats at every table. Shared technology, shared resources, shared defense. In exchange, we will extend the same protection we give our own worlds to every member species." The representative stared at the chip as if it might explode. "You are offering alliance?" the Calorie asked. "After everything that happened?" "Yes. Why?" Admiral Day looked around the room. "Because fear is not the foundation we want to build on. You spent 80 years afraid of what we might become. You pushed us away, tried to keep us weak, hoping we would never notice how powerful we could be." He shook his head slowly. "That path leads to more war. Eternal war. We destroy you, or you eventually destroy us. No one wins." President Beak spoke again. "We do not want to be your nightmares. We want to be your allies. We want to use what we are, our strength, our willingness to fight, our refusal to surrender, to protect instead of destroy. And if we refuse?" the Morthok asked. Day looked at him evenly. "Then we return to war. And we do not stop until one side no longer exists. It was simply a statement of fact. Everyone in the room understood that. The choice is yours, President Beak said. This offer will not come again. Silence stretched across the chamber. Seconds turned into minutes. The representatives looked at each other, communicating in glances and subtle gestures that Day could not read. Finally, the Kalari reached forward. Her glowing hand touched the data chip gently. We accept. One by one, the other representatives followed. The Morthok, despite his harsh words, was third. The smaller species came quickly after, relieved that they would not have to choose sides in an endless war. Ambassador Grell was last. He sat frozen at his table, his four hands gripping its edge. The war had destroyed his reputation. His people blamed him for provoking humanity. He had been stripped of most of his power and brought to this meeting only as a witness. Now, everyone watched him. Slowly, painfully, Grell stood. He walked to the center of the room and looked at Admiral Day for the first time since the meeting began. Hey, I made a mistake, he said quietly. I pushed when I should have listened. I mocked when I should have feared. I started a war that cost millions of lives. Yes, Day said. You did? Grell's hand trembled as he reached for the data chip. Will you forgive us? Day considered the question. Forgiveness was not simple. It did not erase the dead or rebuild the destroyed colonies. It did not bring back the soldiers who had sacrificed themselves or the families who had lost everything. But holding on to anger was just another form of war. And Day was tired of war. Forgiveness takes time, he said finally. But we are willing to try. Grell touched the chip. The offer was complete. Commander Hannah moved to Day's side as the representatives began talking among themselves. Their voices filled with a mixture of relief and uncertainty. The tension in the room had not disappeared, but it had changed into something else. Something that might eventually become trust. You think they will ever stop being afraid of us? She asked quietly. Day watched the aliens. He saw the way they glanced at the humans when they thought no one was looking. He saw the careful distance they kept even now. He saw the fear that still lived behind their eyes. No, he said honestly, I do not think they will ever completely stop. Then what was the point of all this? He turned to look at her. Fear can become respect. Respect can become trust. It does not happen quickly. It takes years, maybe generations. But it can happen. He looked back. Kay at the council chamber, at the broken pieces of the old order and the fragile beginnings of something new. We showed them what we are capable of when we fight. Now we have to show them what we are capable of when we choose not to. President Beak's hologram flickered beside them. Admiral Commander? Well done. Come home. The image faded. Day and Hannah walked toward the door, leaving behind a room full of beings who had spent centuries building walls against humanity. Those walls were gone now, destroyed not by weapons, but by an open hand. As they reached the corridor, Hannah spoke one more time. What happens now? Day smiled slightly. It was the first real smile he had worn in months. Now the hard part begins. We spent 10,000 years learning how to destroy. Now we learn how to build. They walked out of Station Apex and into a galaxy that would never see humanity the same way again. The monsters had come. They had shown their teeth. And then, against all expectations, they had offered peace. It would take generations to heal the wounds of this war. Trust would be built slowly, one treaty at a time, one shared project at a time, one gesture of goodwill at a time. There would be setbacks and conflicts and moments when the old fear would rise again, but humanity had proven something that no one, not even themselves, had fully understood before. They were capable of terrible destruction, yes, but they were also capable of choosing a different path, of taking their power and using it to protect instead of conquer, and perhaps that was the most frightening thing of all. Not that humans could destroy galaxies, but that they could choose not to. The stars waited, cold and endless, as humanity began the longer work of mastering peace.